These two images are the same data, and I took them on the same night with the same equipment. The processing is identical. One took 30 minutes of extra work at the end of the session, and I want to show you exactly what that 30 minutes actually changed and whether it was worth it. After the dark frames video that I recently recorded, two experts reached out to me with important feedback. Queeve the Lazy Geek told me my offset setting needed correcting and raised concerns about my acquisition methodology. Fair enough. A fellow YouTuber with over 31,000 subscribers in this exact niche also questioned whether my Master Dark was acquired correctly. And looking at it carefully, both were right. So I fixed the methodology, ran a new controlled test, and this time I tested not just darks, but all three calibration frames: bias, flats, and darks. And here's what I found. Before the results, let me give you some context on why calibration frames matter and why getting them wrong can actually make your images worse rather than better. But first, I want to just make an admission that I have actually been taking images for some time now and not actually using any calibration frames at all. So I think it's also for my benefit, and hopefully for yours too, that we do this video. Calibration frames are designed to remove fixed systematic errors from your data. Bias frames remove the electronic readout noise pattern of your sensor. Flat frames correct for uneven illumination across the sensor, such as vignetting from your optical system, and dust motes on your sensor or filters. This is something in particular that really bothers me. Dark frames, what do? Well, they subtract thermal noise and hot pixels that accumulate during long exposures. In theory, applying all these three gives you the cleanest possible stack. In practice, as I discovered, the order you apply them and how you prepare them matters enormously. Get it wrong and you can destroy your image entirely. More on that coming up. Okay, let's take a look at stack one. Lights only, no calibration frames, raw auto stretch in siril. The green cast is normal for an OSC sensor before color calibration. That's the Bayer matrix with twice as many green pixels as red or blue. What I want you to look at is the background. It's not flat. There's a clear brightness gradient from center to corners. That's vignetting from the optical system. The background texture is uneven and patchy. There are dust motes that you can clearly see. This is your baseline. The nebula core looks bright. That's the auto stretch being aggressive. It's a diagnostic tool, not a processing tool. In normal processing, you'd use a more gentle, gradual stretch to preserve that core detail. Stack 2. Bias frames have now been added, and I took 100 frames of those at minimum exposure, gain 100, offset 50, lens cap on, pitch dark room. The difference is subtle but real. Background noise is slightly lower. The image is marginally cleaner. The bias frames capture the fixed readout noise pattern of the sensor and subtract it from every light frame. The vignetting gradient is still visible though. Bias frames don't correct for optical system problems. For that you need flats. And here's an interesting sidebar for you. Bias frames are especially valuable on sensors with visible column banding. If you shoot narrowband and see faint vertical stripes in your raw data, that's fixed pattern noise. Bias frames are specifically designed to remove this. Stack 3. I've added bias and flat frames together. 30 flat frames at 1.5 seconds exposure through the same duoband filter taken immediately after the session with the optical train completely unchanged. The same filter, the same reducer, and the same camera position. Look at the background now. It's flat. It's even. The vignetting gradient is almost gone. That uneven patchy texture has disappeared. M57 sits in a properly corrected field for the first time. The nebula also appears slightly brighter and better defined. That's the auto stretch responding to a cleaner image. With the background vignetting removed, the stretch has more dynamic range to reveal the nebula signal properly. And here are all three together. Lights only, uneven background. heavy vignetting. Bias added, marginally cleaner. Bias and flats, a flat background, a corrected field, dramatically cleaner result, and the dust motes, most importantly, have gone. Flat frames has made the most dramatic signal improvement of this entire test. Why? Because vignetting is a fixed, consistent, repeatable pattern from your optical system. The flat frames capture that pattern precisely and divide it out every time. That's exactly what they're designed to do. But I just want to pause here because I made a huge mistake during this test. When I first tried to add the dark frames to the mix alongside the bias and flat frames, the result was absolutely catastrophic. The stacked image was completely black. Most of the signal had been subtracted by the dark. There was almost nothing visible. After a great deal of frustration, I've discovered what was happening. My master dark hadn't had the bias removed before stacking. My master flat hadn't had the bias removed either. So when Siril applied all three calibration frames to my lights, it subtracted the bias directly, then subtracted it again through the dark, then divided it out a third time through the flat. Once I understood the problem though, after quite a bit of a headache, I did correct it. And now I've applied biases to both darks and flats before stacking the masters. Rather than combining all three corrected calibration frames together, I chose to test the corrected dark on its own. A stack with all three correctly prepared calibration frames together is something you can try out for yourself. But based on everything this test has shown me, the marginal improvement from adding correctly prepared darks on top of both bias and flats is unlikely to justify the time investment on a modern cooled camera with dithering enabled. Do try it and do let me know what you find in the comments. Here's stack 4 alongside stack 1. The image is clean, M57 is clearly visible, the dark subtraction is working correctly without destroying the signal. The improvement from the corrected dark is subtle, similar to bias alone. On the ASI533 MCPRO, with dithering and Winsorized sigma clipping, the dark current is low enough that even correctly applied darks make very little visible difference. The camera and stacking workflow are already handling what darks are designed to fix. This directly addresses the expert feedback. With correctly prepared dark frames, the subtraction works as intended. But the honest finding remains. The time investment in dark frames gives very little return compared to biases and flats. There are three specific methodology changes that I made based on the expert feedback that I received. First was the offset. This test used offset 50 throughout. The second thing was the acquisition. All calibration frames were taken in a completely dark room with the lens cap on. Space Koala specifically raised the concern about light leaks on mirroscopes. In my last video, I actually took the darks outside and didn't cover the telescope. The third thing I want to point out is the workflow order. Always apply your calibration frames to your raw light data first, then register the calibrated result. This ensures that the flat frames correct the actual raw Bayer data before any rotation or flipping happens during registration. So what does the full picture look like? Bias frames, subtle but real improvement. They're worth taking. It's quick and easy. Flat frames, the most dramatic improvement, removes vignetting completely and takes just 30 minutes at the end of your session, and it's absolutely worth it. Take them immediately after imaging without moving anything in your optical train. Apply your master's bias to your flat frames before stacking the master flat. And as for dark frames, on a modern cooled camera with dithering and Winsorized sigma clipping, the case for investing significant time in darks is weak. If you're going to use them, prepare them correctly. Bias correction them first. Match your offset, temperature gain and exposure length exactly. Get any of those wrong and darks will hurt more than help. Free imaging checklist at astroimagery.com/get cheat sheet. The link is below. So are you using flat frames? And did you know about applying bias to your flats before stacking the master? Drop your comments below and what you think. The original dark frames test is here if you missed it.